The origins of the Brotherhood of Nod are shrouded in mystery, and there's never really been a decisive answer as to where they came from. On one hand, some sources say they were founded during the 1800s. On the other hand, the Brotherhood of Nod's distinctive scorpion symbol can be seen on ancient Egyptian tombs. Likewise, the actual age and origin of Cain has never been decisively established in the canon, and has likely changed over time depending on who the writer is and what the current plot is. Now, we can blame this on bad writing, or we can just say it's deliberately ambiguous, and Cain changes the origin or who he is to be in line with, to be in line with whatever the needs of the moment are. Needless to say, we can say the Brotherhood of Nod came to global prominence during the 20th century with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The Brotherhood of Nod seems to have had some sort of connection, and the Black Hand is the elite inner circle of the Brotherhood of Nod, and the most fanatical portion of it. So in this timeline, rather than Serbian nationalists, or perhaps it could have been Serbian nationalists, because the Brotherhood of Nod is linked to a number of real-world terrorist groups, the Brotherhood of Nod was responsible in part for triggering World War I. Now, before we get into the Brotherhood of Nod, I just wanted to talk a bit about the timeline divergences. It's not expressly clear as to which timeline the CNC games follow, whether it follows our timeline or if it follows the Red Alert timeline. In the Red Alert timeline, Einstein went back in time and removed Hitler from history, so Germany more or less remained the Weimar Republic, and the Soviet Union was allowed to grow into a global superpower unmolested, which led to the Second Great War during the 1950s, in which the Allies were able to defeat the Soviet Union at massive cost. However, Kane shows up a number of times throughout the Soviet story as Stalin's chief advisor, and if you beat the Soviet campaign, Kane's second in command refers to the world growing tired of the Soviet Union, the eventual collapse of communism, and its successor, the Brotherhood of Nod. So whether or not the Command and Conquer series takes place in the alternate timeline in which Nazi Germany never happened and the Soviet Union was much larger and longer lasting, or if it takes place in the Arcanon timeline, it's not really clear. It's deliberately kind of left vague. So that being said, I just wanted to kind of establish a bit of the historical background. So what is the Brotherhood of Nod? The Brotherhood of Nod has traits of a nation state, a terrorist group, an international corporation, and a religious movement. The Brotherhood of Nod is more ideological, really, than anything else. It's a loose network of people throughout the world who have pledged allegiance to a common ideology and vision under the leadership of the prophet Kane. So it's kind of hard to know where to start, so let's just talk about what is the Brotherhood of Nod's ideology. The Brotherhood of Nod's ideology is a fairly even mixture of Christianity, Islam, and communism. It has a very strong messianic component, a very strong millenarian component, mixed with extreme populism, redistribution of wealth, and despises the imperialist, fascist Western powers. So it's kind of, in real-world terms, it's kind of a combination of ISIS, Maoist third worldism, and liberation theology. I guess is kind of a good way of describing it. So it's kind of, imagine as if those three things had joined together into kind of a bizarre syncretic ideology. So the Brotherhood of Nod has chapters all throughout the world. It tends to be very decentralized. Because the Brotherhood of Nod lacks the ability to operate in the open like GDI does. Just briefly what GDI is, because it makes... You can't really understand Nod without understanding GDI. GDI was founded in response to the Tiberium crisis and Nod emerging from the shadows and beginning its world conquest. GDI is kind of NATO 2.0, which also has a political feature, and it was founded by a merging, or kind of the confederation of the G8, NATO, and other U.S. allies into a military and political federation with the stated aim of defeating Nod, keeping the Tiberian crisis in check, and retaining global order. So, more or less, the UN dissolves after the creation of GDI. So, the Brotherhood of Nod basically operates mainly in the world's third world countries, where it kind of adapts to whatever the local ideology is there. I think it's implied that the Muslim Brotherhood is a branch of the Brotherhood of Nod, are the world's various communist parties and any number of other millenarian or Islamic movements, or I guess heretical Christian movements. So primarily they go to the world's poorest regions and offer salvation, wealth, and the chance to get back at their perceived oppressors in exchange for their absolute loyalty. As with many millenarian cults, the society is very sharply divided into a ruling caste and a lower caste, the lower caste of which is basically just cannon fodder, and are given cheap weapons and are used as human wave tactics, whereas the upper caste of Nod enjoy much higher privileges, and there's a substantial core of elite soldiers that are given the best training and technologies that money can buy. So, to go into a bit more of the alternate history, because it's necessary to understand Nod, in the Command and Conquer universe, a asteroid crash lands in Italy, specifically on the Tiber River, giving its name Tiberium. Tiberium is this weird hybrid substance. It's both a crystal and a plant. So what it does is it grows like a plant and it spreads very rapidly across the surface. And it grows by leaching resources from the soil. So yeah, it rapidly leaches resources from the soil in order to create the crystals. Now the crystals are very easy to break apart. So you can easily collect them, break them apart, and get pretty much refined raw materials. It also has mutagenic and radioactive properties. So if a human comes in contact with Tiberium, they'll rapidly mutate, and it frequently results in cancer, death, respiratory failure, etc. It can also be used, though, as a limitless energy source, and its unique properties, including some unknown compounds and stable but previously unrecognized elements, make it a great driver of technological innovation. Now, the Brotherhood of Nod at the time of the first Command & Conquer game controls roughly half the global supply of Tiberium, more than twice what GDI has, making them fantastically wealthy and allowing them to use their superior understanding of Tiberium to research forbidden and innovative technologies such as cloaking, advanced chemical weapons, laser technology, all kinds of other things that GDI could only dream of having access to, which enables them to pay off and provide resources to developing nations in exchange for providing them with cannon fodder. So that being said, let's talk a bit more about the Brotherhood of Nod's ideology. So the Brotherhood of Nod was founded and is centered around the enigmatic man Kane, played by Joseph Duncan, I think his name is, who's a very charismatic actor and has played Kane consistently from the first to the last Command and Conquer game. So the origin of Kane is largely unknown. There's speculation that he's an alien. It's also implied that he's the biblical Kane very strongly, as he makes reference to it, and Nod makes frequent reference to the Bible. In the first Command & Conquer game, before Kane shows up, you're being instructed by a man named Seth, who obviously is the third son of Adam, and he goes, "My name is Seth, just Seth, from God to Cain to Seth." So it's strongly implied that Cain is the biblical Cain. He also appears to be immortal, as his death and resurrection is a frequent theme throughout the series. As to how old he actually is, etc., is unknown, but he does have knowledge of the Scrin, who he calls the Visitors. Regardless, it's beyond question that he founded the Brotherhood of Nod. Now, it's somewhat ambiguous what their actual ideology is, probably in part because it's Islamic, and Islam is known for being very vague and viewing God and kind of actual theology as being somewhat imperceptible. I understand that it does have a defined theology, but a lot of it is legalistic in nature and trying to interpret how God intended us to live, as opposed to Christianity where you're trying to define the nature of God. So God in Nod theology is this very remote figure who's very seldom referenced by name. So essentially they believe that Tiberium is a gift from God that has been given specifically to humanity in order to allow their transformation into a new species and to allow limitless wealth for the creation of a global utopia under the Brotherhood of Nod. It's a bit kind of like the Brotherhood of Darkness, where they go all are equal in the Brotherhood of Nod, as it has very definitive communist overtones. GDI has a very different opinion of Tiberium, viewing it as a plague that will eventually destroy the Earth, of which they're completely right. Because Tiberium spreads very rapidly, and it leaches the soil dry. It kills all wildlife and plant life. And it gradually, over the course of the games, makes the Earth into a Tiberian sun. It eventually even is able to grow across the ocean, and more of the world is gradually made uninhabitable for humans, and transforms the surface into an alien planet. The Brotherhood believes that once Tiberium has infected all the world, it's kind of a bit like the Last Judgment. God has sent this as the beginning of the time of ordeals, and once the time of ordeals has finished and Tiberium has infected all of the Earth, some form of transcendence will occur. How the Brotherhood views the future of Tiberium and how they view its promise changes very rapidly throughout the different games. Whether or not that's different writing, Kane reacting to a different zeitgeist, is completely unknown. In the first Command & Conquer game, while Kane and the Brotherhood did have the general messianic, millenarian tendencies, their view was less focused on Tiberium as an end into of itself, and a focus of Tiberium as being a great equalizer, something that would provide the disadvantaged third world portion of the world to rise up through its limitless economic and technological wealth and allow them to once and for all overthrow their oppressors, bringing in a global revolution. At the end of the first Tiberium Dawn, the first Command & Conquer game, Cain is seemingly killed, only to resurface 30 years later during the Second Tiberian War. During the Second Tiberian War, as Tiberium has spread more across the Earth and technology has rapidly advanced, the Brotherhood's ideology changes towards a belief that the spread of Tiberium and the engineering of a new Tiberium-based life form is in essence the future. If you beat the Nod campaign in Tiberium's sun, Kane launches the world-altering missile, which sees Tiberium throughout the Earth and permanently changes it into the titular Tiberian sun. Interestingly, a lot of Nod really hates mutants, but one of Kane's goals is to engineer a cybernetic Tiberian hybrid race that can survive within the transformed Earth. That seems to be the ultimate goal of Nod, is to see Tiberium throughout the world and genetically engineer themselves so that they can become immortal. Notably, Tiberium-based life forms, when exposed to Tiberium, will heal and keep themselves young and healthy perpetually. So that's kind of the second phase of the Brotherhood of Nod's millenarian ideology. It should also be noted the Brotherhood of Nod also has a rejection of the idea of creating graven images or images of animals or humans, with the notable exception of the Hand of Nod building. And as such, their aesthetics are a lot more geometric and kind of inspired by Islam, of course. By the time of the third game, Tiberian Wars, more and more of the Earth continues to be ravaged by Tiberium. At this point in time, the world is divided into three regions. Red zones in which all of the world's population has basically been eliminated and nothing can survive. blue zones, all of which are held by GDI and have virtually no Tiberian corruption, and people more or less live there as they had prior to the spread of Tiberian, with the exception that their living standards are a lot higher given the virtually limitless power Tiberian allows, in addition to advancements in robotics, etc. At the time of the Third Tiberian Wars, Kane's ultimate view has changed once again, and he's begun to talk of something called divination or ascension. His goal of which is he basically builds a massive Tiberian vein under Nod's perennial headquarters at Sarajevo, and is able to trick the incompetent head of GDI, Raymond Boyle, to fire a liquid Tiberian missile at the temple, causing a chain reaction that destroys most of Eastern Europe. This launches more or less a signal into outer space, which calls upon the Scrin to show up. The arrival of the Scrin suggests that Tiberian is some sort of super weapon, or rather, it's not clear if it's a weapon, a mining tool, or part of the Scrin's native ecosystem. The Scrin have very much a War of the Worlds-esque insectoid-like appearance. The head of the Scrin is called the Foreman, and they frequently make use to mining technology. They call Tiberian Ichor. I forget what their name is for Kane, but they seem to be aware of Kane and seem to know something about who he is. Kane also knows who the Scrin are and refers to them as the visitors. So, yeah, it's kind of confusing because we don't know if Tiberian is something that the Scrin genetically engineered and they seed worlds with it in order to make the world's resources easy to harvest, and then they go and strip mine said worlds, or if it's a part of their native ecosystem and part of it is to colonize new planets, or if it's some sort of super weapon that they use to conquer planets held by life that can put up a resistance. So we aren't exactly sure what Tiberian is, but it does have some sort of connection to the Scrin, who do actively spread it. So yeah, so that's the Scrin. So the Scrin begin to build Tiberian control nodes or Tiberian towers throughout the world, which seem to have some sort of purpose of being extra-dimensional portals. The idea being, once they have the full space time portals, they can bring limitless reinforcements through them. GDI immediately begins destroying them and is able to destroy all of them but one in Italy, right next to Ground Zero, which remains in Nod's possession. Kane seems satisfied that despite the fact that the Brotherhood of Nod is more or less completely destroyed in the Third Tiberian War, he's accomplished his goal of gaining control of the Tiberian node. It's thought that this is directly tied to ascension, and the Brotherhood begins to become more and more fanatical as more and more of the world is destroyed. By the time of Tiberian Twilight, which I don't really consider canon, it's a piece of shit, and they made it into, like, I don't even want to talk about it, it's so bad. It was multiplayer focused, so they just removed a bunch of shit. But, yeah, so by the events of Tiberian Twilight, Kane makes an alliance with GDI. I should mention at this point, a reoccurring thing throughout the Tiberian games is the Tacitus, which appears to be some sort of alien data core from the Scrin. They take it from a Scrin ship in Tiberian Sun, and it has all sorts of technologies within it, such as the Banshees, which have like plasma cannons and can fly in ways that are physically impossible for standard craft. Tiberian control technology, etc. So by the time of Tiberian Twilight, 95% of the world has been made into red zones, and the blue zones are starting to undergo their own destruction. It seems like humanity will be devastated in a couple short years. Kane shows up and offers to provide a Tiberian control network, which will allow GDI to create and destroy Tiberian at will, if in exchange they build it for him. So the Alliance produces the Tiberian control network, which interfaces with the control tower. So there's a civil war during the fourth game. It's not very interesting, but at the end of it, Kane succeeds in opening up a portal and walks through it, during which time all of his faithful also disappear from the world in a rapture-like incident. ending the Brotherhood of Nod once and for all, and leaving GDI in sole possession of the Earth, and the unenviable task of using the Tiberium control network and the limitless power electricity that it enables them to gradually reclaim and repopulate the Earth. So what can be said about the Brotherhood of Nod, its theology, and its promise? It does seem that in the end, since Cain was able to elevate humanity to his homeworld, a higher plane of existence, another dimension, that there was some truth to his promises. In addition, the fact that he was able to survive multiple fatal wounds and live in virtually the same age for hundreds of years also seems to imply there was something supernatural, or at least extraterrestrial, about his nature. As to whether Cain's goals had always been the same and he always counted on the Scrin coming, or if they changed over time with what technology and what the zeitgeist allowed, we'll never really know. Tiberium Twilight was supposed to answer all of these questions, but it turned into a clusterfuck as EA bought Westwood, dismantled most of it, and had the remaining members of it create a game focused on multiplayer that had a much worse story than the previous ones. So that being said, the Brotherhood of Nod will eternally remain mysterious, but it does serve as an interesting fictional counterpart to organizations like ISIS. Organizations which make pretense to a nation state have things like provinces, regional governors, standing armies, collect taxes, but don't really govern in a traditional way. And despite them holding territory and more or less acting as a nation state, they don't exactly operate in the open because their enemies such as GDI, or in this case the anti-ISIS coalition, has a lot more firepower and would destroy them if they kind of were made public. Also, the international criminal aspect of them, with states like North Korea or the drug cartels, which are kind of another similar analog to Nod, often will have more money and more resources than the nation states who are fighting against them. Imagine how powerful ISIS would be if, like Nod, it was able to assume the entirety of the South American drug cartels and use the virtually limitless cash generated by illegal drugs to fund its activities. In fact, one of the chief Nod commander during the Second Tiberian War in the Western Hemisphere was a man named Vega, who made most of his money, aside from Tiberian, selling something called eye candy, which is basically a drug that is diffused directly through the eyeball. It's kind of some weird futuristic thing, and that's where he makes most of his cash. So, I guess you could say Nod is kind of a combination of ISIS, the drug cartels, while also having aspects of a global centralized religious movement like the Catholic Church. Within Nod, most things have some form of religious symbolism. Ranks are often things like abbess, confessor, priest, prophet, that sort of thing. And biblical things biblical allusions amount. The second last mission in Cain's Wrath, for instance, is called Word Made Flesh. And yeah, and there's the Anointed of Cain, the Marked of Cain, the Black Hand, the Confessors, that sort of thing. Nod also borrows much from communist symbolism and imagery, with expressions such as peace through power, one vision, one purpose, and the technology of peace all sound like the progressivist promises of communism. So that's more or less a view of the Brotherhood of Nod. I've done the best I can with a lot of material that requires a great deal of speculation, extra canon sources, etc. So I hope you enjoyed the video. That's another episode of Sci-Fi Pol Sci. More stuff to come.